globe. He is also the country lead for learning and development in India. He has also experience in designing, developing, and facilitating various leadership trainings within HP for the last 11 years. Prior to HP, Dileepan worked for Defense Research and Development Organization as a scientist in defense communication area in their R&D labs in Bangalore for 7 years. Dileepan is the son of former chairman of ISRO Padma Shri G. Madhavan Nair. Let's welcome Dileepan for his session. Dileepan, welcome. And
Thank you.
yeah.
Thank you, Dileep, for the wonderful introduction. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening from wherever you are joining us today. We are all living in a disrupted world, and this has happened in the last few weeks or months, and things have been changing every day. And this topic that I'm going to talk to you all today is about how we as project and program management professionals are able to understand and adapt to this change and are able to run your organizations to a success. Before I start, some ground rules. So I want this session to be a interactive session. So I need responses from you in the chat or the Q&A box as I go through. You can keep on posting your questions, but I will be taking the questions at the end of the session as moderated by the team. So these are some ground rules for the session. So let's move on to what am I going to talk to you all, right? I know all of you would have had immense experience in managing change. But today what we are going to understand is how people react to change, right? And what, as leaders of the organization, the steps you can take to drive change within the organization, and also what are the additional things you need to do to manage large-scale change like the one that's happening. Moving on, I want to ask this question to all of you, right? What kind of changes have you encountered in the past, right? You can type your responses in your Q&A box, right, the chat box. I just want to hear the experiences you have encountered about change in the past, and also how have you managed those changes, right? Anyone who wants to share can type in your answers.
Sir, there is a response from Praveen. He has mentioned restructuring of organization.
Yes, definitely. Restructuring of organization is one of the big changes that many of us as leaders come across, right? And these days, companies reorganize every now and then. And just for your information, my own organization has reorganized 3 times in the last 2 years. So definitely, org, org changes are a big factor for change. Anybody else wants to share? Recession cycles, yes. Working to different time zones, very good, right? As you can see, some of these are beyond our control and some of these are within our control, right? So change can be categorized into 2 categories: those which you can manage, which are within your control, and things which are beyond your control. And today's situation with COVID-19 and everything around it, I would put most of it as a change which is externally driven, right? So as we talk about change, what we have to understand is what is the driver for the change. So as you can see here in the next slide, there are multiple factors which causes change. It can be a technology disruption, right, where a new technology is getting introduced. A best example is smartphones we use, right? Or it could be an innovation which is making a big change in a particular industry. There could be new business models, So the best example of that kind of a change is a Ola Uberization of the taxi world, right? Or it could be competition or an external industry which is driving the change. I would talk in length about all these change drivers if I were talking a few months ago. But today you can see that the biggest change drivers is the environment, right? In this case, a health environment issue, or the second biggest factor today is economy and government policies, right? There are a lot of changes in economy and government practices which is driving this change. So you can see that one of the things you have to understand as a leader is what is driving this change, and how can I react to that change based on the corresponding driver. Moving on, my next question to you all is, what major changes do you see today, right? And what are the challenges you are facing during this change, right? Can you all see the slide? I am in the slide which says what's going on now. I understand there may be a slight delay because of the virtual meeting tool. So you should be seeing the slide, what's going on now. So the question is, what major changes do you see today, and what are the key challenges you are facing during this change? Again, as I told you, I would like to hear from you as I go through the session, because that will help us be in sync on what I'm talking and how you are able to relate to. Yes, there is a very good response, 100% work from home. Yes, that's a big change we all need to understand. Maintaining team collaboration in work from home period. Yes, definitely. Changing priorities. Yes. Yes, I think these are the global changes that everyone in the industry is facing, right? So just to share a personal example, though I do a global role, I used to be a person who used to go every day to office, and I would spend about 5 to 6 hours working from my office in Bangalore. And in the evenings, I was used to working from home, taking over my global calls. But on March 22nd, the whole world changed for me. My company said that I cannot go into office, and all my training materials, all the infrastructure that I was using for my sessions, everything was left in the office. And next Monday morning, I was in a panic. How am I going to do my job? Oh, what will I do if I work from home? Again, my whole family was also locked down with me. How do I manage the situation? Right? At the same time, there was this big change about limited groceries being available, shops being shut, nothing you can go and buy even in online. So that's a big change for all of us, right? Now, what we have to understand is the change that we are seeing today has some unique characteristics, right? Unlike in the past. So one thing I want to help you all understand is the scale is massive, right? So I would say that similar situation would have happened maybe during world wars, right, where the entire world is in a chaos, or maybe in similar epidemics like the Spanish flu. But today, every level of humanity is impacted. The second important factor is the speed, right? So typically when we talk about an organizational change, it is planned, it is communicated, and there are weeks and months available for people leaders like you to manage those change. So I'm understanding that slides are moving. Now I am in the difference between the current change and the past. Can somebody acknowledge that I'm in that? You can see that change.
No, sir, the slides are not moving.
Oh, okay. Actually, I'm moving the slides in the room, but I don't know how.
I'll do it from my side. So let me. So this is slide number.
The slide number is 7.
Difference between current change and the past.
Yes, please.
You can let me know when the slide
Yes,
needs to be
sure,
changed.
sure. I'll do that. Thank you. So the third is the impact of the change, right? As I mentioned earlier, this is a global change. There are huge disruptions, right? And it's not just impacting one industry or one technology or one part of the world. It's across industries, and there are significant changes in human behaviors, right? Who in the world would have thought about social distancing? Who in the world would have thought of you need to wear a mask if you need to step out of the home, right? So these are changes which are going to impact, and these are not changes which will go away maybe after a few weeks or a few months. These changes are going to stay with humanity for the rest of the world, and we need to understand how do you manage this, right? So again, I was interesting reading a very interesting study which says that the commercial real estate market, right, is going to make a big shift because now when people are working from home, why should companies invest in infrastructure? They can let people use their own home infrastructure. So now the challenge for the organization is how do you provide the best in class work from home features, right? What are the benefits you are going to offer to employees to work from home? What are the policies you need to lay down, right? In my organization, about 6 months ago, if you were talking to any project or program manager, they would say that, oh, I want to see all my people every day. I can't manage them if they don't come in. It's very difficult to manage remote workers. Now, if I go and talk to the same people, they would say that, yeah, I'm managing, right? It needs extra effort. I need to ensure that people finish their work. The way I track and plan things need to change, right? So that's the kind of impact I'm talking of. And last but not least, we need to understand that there is a cascade effect. So it's not just one thing that's changing. There is multiple things which gets changed because of one small change. So this is the biggest difference between changes we have encountered. Again, the examples of reorganization, right, versus the current change. Can I move to the next slide, please? Right?
Yep. So there is a problem in changing the slides. You can continue. We'll rectify it parallelly.
Okay. Okay. So how do we handle this, right? So the things that we have to understand is we as leaders need to understand that this change is for real, right? The change starts from you. So don't expect that somebody else is going to help you manage this. The second most important thing you have to understand is you have to stop and assess the impact. What is the impact to your project? What is the impact to your organization? What is the impact to the industry or vertical you are working, right? So if it was an organizational change, you would typically focus on, okay, how is my business unit going to fit into the new business unit, and what kind of org changes or reporting changes happen, what kind of new policies come in, right? Whereas today, as I told, that due to the cascade effect, right, we need to really assess the impact of that change on everything, right? For example, people who are doing software development and deployment need to understand that there is no more physical access to equipments. right? So how do you manage that situation? How do you ensure that things change, right? And the second thing is, as leaders, you need to start scenario planning, right? What if, right? Now, if this tomorrow government says that 33% of the workforce can come back to office, who are the 33% you are going to bring back? And how are you going to redistribute the work among those 33%, right? So you need to understand different scenario planning. And the next thing is, okay, suddenly if our site gets again infected and when everybody 100% needs to go back and work from home, how do you manage that, right? And successful organizations which have really managed these kind of massive changes are the ones which have really come up with a future vision and strategy for the organization in a changed environment, right? So when you understand this change is for real, when you understand the impact, and once you do the scenario planning, you can come out with. And you may be wondering, oh, I'm managing a 10-member project or I'm handling a 100-member team program. Where would this vision or strategy come? I would say that every organization which has multiple members, right, whether you are a people manager or a program manager, you need to understand that you should have a purpose and a end goal, right, where you want your particular project or program to reach. And that's what we call as vision. So it's not like the company vision or something like that. Where do you want to really see success, and what's your approach to get to that success? Can I move to the next slide?
Sir, can you try from your side? I guess the issue is resolved now.
Okay, I've moved the
Yeah.
slide on my end. Can you see this?
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Okay, okay. So then once you decide how you want to move, it's not possible to take everyone along, right? So you need to ensure that you build a team, and within the organization, you need to create a sense of urgency. Many organizations which have failed have forgotten to create this sense of urgency. So this may call for a talk with all your team saying that the situation is not business as usual. There are significant impact to our organization if we don't execute on this vision and strategy, right? And as all of you know, you need to build a plan, and not only build a plan, ensure that there are early wins. Now, why do we need to have early wins? Because the early wins will help people, as I go to the next session, understand that this change is for real and it's possible to make changes, right? And as you all know, being a successful leaders, executing the plan and using an agile and iterative approach are very, very critical, right? And last but not least, don't wait for everything to be black and white. You need to take and adapt and go methodology. You can't have everything all I's and dots crossed. You need to ensure that things move as you need. Moving on, today's situation is little different from a normal change management. And as leaders, many of us are trained to say, okay, what's happening to my team next week, next month, worst case, next quarter. So here you need to pause and understand that you need to take a long term view, right? So you cannot keep on changing every day, every week, something, right? You need to understand that this change is going to take a long term to settle down. And what can I do as a team? The second thing is you need to take your people along. And that can be easily done by delegating and building trust within your team, right? Because some of the decisions could be tough, right? So you may be asked to reduce your workforce by 30%. Now, who are the right 30% to be removed? And then what do you do with the remaining people, right? Because there will be a fear with everyone. Am I the next one? Am I going to be impacted next? But you need to ensure that you build that trust with your people, that people feel that, yes, this is a journey, this is a new journey, and my leader is with me. And we need to provide that proper support and guidance, right? The challenge is many people are new to this, especially if you have a very young workforce. People have not seen something like this. They are just 2 or 3 years into their career, and they need proper support and guidance in these kind of situations. And last but not least, many leaders in such situation, right, goes back to their primitive behavior. Okay, I know how to do this. Let me fix it myself, right? Can I do this all by myself? Oh, these people can't handle things. Can I do it all by yourself, right? So these are the things you need to take care extra before the regular things happen during change. I want to leave you with this quote by John F. Kennedy as we wind up this particular session. So you understood there are change drivers, then you understood that there is a methodology to go about doing this, and successful leaders are the ones who make this happen, right? Now let's switch topics. How do you drive this change? I gave you a lot of things to do in my earlier section, but what is this driving change, right? And what challenges do you normally face while driving change? The first and foremost is the resistance to change, because all of us like to be in our comfort zone, and this is a typical human behavior. As you know, humans have evolved from rest of the species, and their brain is very used to repetitively doing same things, right? And whenever there is a threat, and in the primitive days, these would be a threat from an external environment, right? Like a animal coming at you or a natural disaster, right? Our brain gets into a flight or fight, right? So either we like to escape from it or we like to fight against the change. But both these approaches are not going to change or help us. We need to ensure that we think calmly and we do things properly. The other key things I see as challenges to driving change is lack of transparency, right? Only a few people in the organization knows what's going on and others are kept in dark. So I want to ensure that people follow these principles as they drive change. Moving on, I want to introduce this concept of resilience, right? I know that most of you as leaders have a high level of resilience, and that's why you are project leaders or program managers. You have seen changes in the past, and you know how the organizations or people behave when a change, right? So, what you need to understand is resilient people are flexible, right? They are able to have a higher level of physical and emotional health, right? And emotions are a very critical thing, as many of you may not have encountered many of these emotions before, right? Somebody is stuck in his hometown, he wants to come back and he's not able to, or you have lost somebody near and dear and you are not able to travel. These are all very stressful emotional situations you would not have had to handle in the past, right? And one of the key things of successful, resilient people are staying focused, right? Don't get distracted. You may see hundreds of WhatsApp videos or social media postings, but you know what you are really focused, what your team and you need to achieve, and you stay there, right? And you should be ready when things become normal. You are a successful emerging from that situation, right? So that's the way resilience plays out. Now, moving on, I want to explain to you how humans behave during a change, because understanding this is very, very critical for you to manage change. So, this is from a very well researched model called Kubler-Ross model, and it talks about the different emotional states that every individual undergoes when a change happens. It all starts with shock. So that was my state on 22nd May, right? And then there is a denial phase where I'm thinking, is this really true? Or maybe this is just people overreacting. We should not be having the lockdown. It's not going to happen to me. I may be still allowed to go back to office, right? And then starts the frustration phase, right? Where I'm saying, okay, I don't know how I'm going to manage. How am I going to? My family is there at my home. I only have a two-bedroom flat. How do I manage my calls in that two-bedroom flat? How do I manage my child who is at home along with my work? And then for a few hours, few days, few weeks, I would be in the state of depression, right? Nothing is working, and I'll express that depression and emotions with everyone around me, be it my colleagues, be it my family. But then after that settling period, I suddenly start saying, okay, anyway, now I have to work from home. What can I change? What can I change in my routine? So that's the experiment phase. And after that phase, I suddenly say, okay, this is going to be the new normal. Okay, I need to change myself. Some things have worked, some things have not worked. Let me start focusing on things which have worked. And finally, it becomes my daily routine. So this is a typical emotional curve everyone undergoes when a change happens. Now, the interesting thing about this particular curve is this curve is highly individualistic. So, if you ask me this question, how many hours, how many days, how many weeks does it take for somebody to navigate this? I would say it varies from person to person. Because I know even today in my team, people who are still in the denial state despite working from home for 30 days. On the other hand, there are people who have gone ahead beyond integration in the first 2 days of change. They've said, okay, this is how we are going to do. Let me uh, come up with a new routine. Okay, these meetings need to be moved around. How do I learn virtually managing things? So, so that's why I said it's very people dependent. And as leaders, you need to understand that there is no one size fits all template that you can apply in this situation, right? Now, the successful people who manage this kind of a change are the ones who are able to understand this and who are able to help your team to navigate this movement. And one another interesting thing I want all of you to think is you may think this curve is one, but in today's world, there will be multiple such curves happening in your teams at the same time. There may be a change in work from home policy. At the same time, because of the business situation, there may be a change introduced in the compensation and benefit policy. At the same time, there could be a change from customer saying that I'm putting all these projects on hold. Or there could be a demand from your senior leader that we need to accelerate the release of this product because there are customers waiting for this. And this is a very critical product to get out at this time. So don't think there's only one curve happening at the same time. There will be multiple curves happening at the same time, and your success is in how do you manage these multiple curves at the same time. So, what can you do as a leader, right? So, you have to understand that if you look at the previous curve, there are three phases that every human being is going to undergo. The first phase is called letting go, right? Many a times we say, right, let go of the past, focus on the future, right? So, when people are in the denial mode, they are really struggling to let go. And as a leader, you have to ensure that you work with those individuals to create an alignment with the new direction, the new approach. That's why I said earlier, right? You as a leader should have a clear vision where you need to go, and you need to ensure that your entire team aligns to that. Then, when frustration builds up, you have to increase your communication. Maybe you need to connect with people on a twice a week, once a day. It all depends on the nature of your project or program and the complexity, right? If you have a distributed team, you should ensure that everybody's time zone works. You respect people's lunch hours, those kind of things, right? And ensure that there is a free flow of communication. Because one thing many leaders tend to do is you try to hold back your communication. You want to have clarity on everything before you communicate. So the tip for such people is communicate more. Now, as you see that people are entering the neutral phase, right? You need to ignite the motivation. You need to show the green grass on the other side. You need to push people saying, yes, I can see you are changing. Now, here is what I would suggest you to move more, right? So there was this team member of mine who was getting frustrated that everything needs to be done virtually. I don't have any way of doing things virtually. I told that person, try doing something for 1 hour virtually and see how things work, right? So the whole idea is start small, right? And then the next step when they traverse that neutral phase is to start experimenting. So the example I gave you just now is a good way of experimenting, right? So ask 30% of your people to work on a particular day and see how they are able to collaborate with the remaining 60%, right? So start with experiments, and in this state you should help them get the sufficient training. If you are deploying new processes, ensure that everybody in the organization has the skills to deploy the process. And last but not least, when people are all ready, you should continually share information, right? So don't let silos build in your organization. Ensure that there is a free flow of communication across the silos so that people can really make use of the new beginning. So this is what you need to really do as a leader to ensure that your organization and the people are aligned and are able to move along when this change happens. Now, typically when this kind of a change happens, there is three types of people in your team, right? And again, this may be your team, this may be your organization, this may be in the whole world, right? There are these people who are early adopters. These are the people who thrive handling change. These people hate status quo, right? Every team would have these kind of people, and they are the people to say, okay, I'm very happy that you introduce work from home policy. Now, these are the things I will try out differently when this, okay, I'll start learning something new at home, right? I would do something differently at home so that I'm able to overcome my boredom, right? Then there are this big bulk of people who are called fence sitters, and typically these are the people who have been within your organization for a long time. These are the people who really want to wait and watch. They don't want to change things. Okay, maybe this whole shutdown will go away in 2 weeks and then everything will be back. Then why should I change, right? I'll just wait and watch. These are called fence sitters. And then the third category are detractors. And in detractors, within them, there are two. There are people who are open and people who are silent. And what you need to understand is it's very easy to handle the open detractors because they will be expressing their opinions, they will be expressing their frustrations openly, and it's very easy for you to, as a leader, to engage them and bring them in line. Whereas the silent detractors, they wouldn't say yes or no, and you would have heard of this term called passive aggression, right? They would say yes in the meeting, but when they walk out of the meeting, they are not able to align with you, right? So the success for you as a leader is how do you make use of these three categories of people to drive the change, right? So for early adopters, what you have to do is I spoke about A team earlier, right? These are the people to be enlisted in your A team. They are able to take in your suggestions, try out new things, and the advantage with having that A team or early adopters is rest of the people will start looking at, oh, this person is doing all these new things and that person is not getting affected, right? And when you have fence sitters, you need to understand that these are the people who needs to be handled with a glove in hand, right? Where they need to really be convinced that the early adopters have made success and you can also follow them. And last but not least, for detractors, right, you have to have a lot of patience, right? You need to ensure that you are able to identify and help them overcome that. This is where your emotional intelligence need to be played out most, right? You have to understand the fear of each individual. Is he afraid of losing his job? Is that person afraid of, okay, will my promotion be delayed because of this massive disruption? Is that person worried, will my pay get cut, right? You need to really identify and understand, right? And you have to spend time with them, right? So I would say early adopters, Show them the vision, give them the path, let them run. Fence sitters, be in constant touch, help them understand this change is for real, and you also need to make a change. And detractors, handle them with a flow. And it's very easy to see what's the behavior that a detractor says versus a adopter shows. So detractors show, okay, this guy doesn't know how to handle things, right? I need to be defining what happens here, right? Oh, this particular process will never work, right? You would have heard all these kind of things whenever a change happens, right? Or they are saying that, okay, you decide, I will just execute. I don't want to be part of this. If there is a success, you can take the credit. There's a failure. I don't want to be part of that failure. And last but not least, I mentioned earlier, right? There is a lot of fear of personal loss around status, friends, money. So these are all the key characteristics of detractors. On the other hand, adapters are the leaders in the front, right? I would ensure that each and every member in your team, especially you yourself, should wear the hat of an adopter, right? You need to ensure that adopters always look at any change as opportunity, right, and make the best of it. And they are very eager to be part of that planning and execution. And last but not least, they all know that when things settle down, there is a green world and they will be part of that green world. So this is how the change from a detractor to adopter happens. And this is what you all need to watch out as leaders to ensure that your organization navigates the change. Moving on, one thing if I want to remind you as participants in this session, it's all about leadership. There is enough research to prove that in a crisis like this, right, 70 to 90% is about leadership. And in this case, it's not just about individual leadership, it's also about team leadership. How do you go to your team every day morning and say that, look, guys, the world has changed in the last 24 hours. This is how we are going to navigate the new horizon, right? And yes, because you're all managers also at the same time, you need to apply your management concept, but that will be only 10 to 30%. And again, depending on each situation, this ratio will vary, but you have to understand that it's all about leadership. And I want to remind you of this quote from Mahatma Gandhi, right? So if you want to drive the change, you yourself have to demonstrate that change. So on 24th March morning, when the lockdown started, I was the first one to say, team, I know, I sent out a message to all my team members saying, I hate working from home, but I understand that that's going to be the new normal. This is how I will be working from home. These are the timings you will be able to reach out to me. This is the process I am going to conduct my team meetings. This is how my clients can reach me. I sent out that memo, right, as a leader. And then that helped instill that feeling in me that, yes, I'm with this change. I'm going to do everything to make my organization navigate this change, right? So you have to step up and be the leader who drives. And next two slides, I'm going to give you some tips which has worked for me as a leader to manage detractors and early adopters, right? So you need to understand. So don't have a team meeting and ask, what are the challenges you are facing? You will get very poor response because detractors would never open up, right? So once you are able to identify early adopters, fence sitters, and distractors, you need to understand detractors with one-on-one, right? You can create a open environment, right? If you have inculcated this already in your team, people should be open up saying, Dileepan, the timing you have chosen for the call is very inappropriate. It impacts ABC. So can we change that timing? Or you are asking us to have a stand-up meeting every day. Can't we do alternate days? Because there is so much change that's happening and it's not difficult to have a daily meeting, right? And start asking clarifying questions. And last but not least, one of the key skills as leaders today you should have is the listening skills, right? Because today you don't have the ability to see them unless you're having a video call, which is a very rare thing. You have to look for silences. You have to look for people who are not opening up. and listening skills are very, very critical in this kind of a situation to be successful. Moving on, right? You need to continuously communicate and tell people, right, the positives. And when people are bringing negatives, right, you need to use your influencing skills to change their mindset. You need to be inclusive and consultative. The reason is this is a journey you need to undertake as a team. So there is no point in leaving somebody behind, or saying that, okay, detractors will never change. Let's not bother about it, right? As a leader, you need to be inclusive and consultative. You need, as you become consultative, right, there is no more suggestions coming. See what can be fitted, right? See, the advantage of incorporating your team's suggestions into your change plan is they feel that this is my change, this is something I suggested which is going to work, right? And last but not least, ensure that everybody has a role in the implementation phase. So these are some tips from successful leaders who have driven changes, right? And for you as leaders to enable, these are some tips I would say you as leaders need to really focus on, right? So the first step is to create a sense of purpose. As I mentioned, you need to take charge and lead from the front. And last but not least, you need to communicate consistently. So it's not like 1 week you had a meeting and then for the next 3 weeks you don't engage with your team. You need to ensure that your team gets communicated very clearly and in a consistent manner. And if I were to close this call, right, and to say 3 or 4 things I want you to walk out of today's session. One, we have to understand this disruptive change, which is very fast, is going to be a permanent condition, right? So don't think that things are going to be normal in the next few weeks, few months. This is going to be permanent change. Second, there will be many first situations that you need to encounter, and you need to ensure that you build resilience to deliver the results. Be mindful of human reactions, right? Because only if you take your people along, you will be successful. So if you think, okay, I know everything, I can handle the whole situation, that's not going to help you. And last but not least, you need to identify and focus on what you can control. So that brings me to the end of my presentation. But before I open up for Q&A, I just want to show some acknowledgements. Most of the things you have heard is predominantly from some of the research articles I have been reading, mostly from Harvard Business Review on change management and things like that. And I'm also providing a set of articles and books if you are interested in really going deep and trying to understand more of it, right, on books and videos. And I'm sure the organizers will share this resources list with all of you. And with that, I would like to go to the Q&A session. Moderator, can you just help me get the Q&A questions?
Sure, sir. I'll read out the question as and when I get it.
Yeah. If you have any questions, feel free to ask me. I know there was a lot of theoretical content in the session. The reason being, with 1 hour and a topic which I normally teach 2 to 3 days, there is very little time to give examples and take you through case studies and simulations. So I just tried to at least give you some tips which will help you navigate this change. Any questions?
Please use the chat window or Q&A tab to review question. Yeah, we have something. Yes, some industries are likely to take more time to recover. Example, hospitality. What is your view for the professionals in that industries?
So in any industry, right, what you have to really understand is what is going to be the new norm. What are the roles that are going to be successful in the new norm, and what skills you need to be successful in that role, right? So, for example, especially in the hospitality industry, right, you would not be able to accommodate large functions, right? Now, how do you enable holding large functions in an innovative way, right? So that first it calls for coming up with new innovations, right? So if you are a leader or a manager of that particular industry, you should be knowing new ways of doing things, right? So the best example I can give you is many hotel chains in Bangalore, like the Taj and ITC, which would never even look at home delivery, right? When the recession started, they said that our kitchens are idling, our staff is idling. You can order five-star food sitting at home. This is the first time in my life I've seen something like that, right? I can eat the Taj West End food sitting at my home. And one, I know that it's cooked in a safe environment and they have their own delivery mechanism. They are not depending on a Uber or a Zomato to deliver. They are delivering at home. What I feel as a consumer, right? One of the well protected environment they are cooking and delivering. So these are the things people need to think, right? There will be changes in the hospitality industry. We need to understand what are the innovations that will still help you survive, right? And then as an individual, you need to really understand what new skills are needed in that change environment. So I'll give you my own simple example, right? So I'm very used to delivering these kind of sessions on a face-to-face format, and I generally don't like delivering virtual because I lose the connect with the audience. But the first thing I learned on the lockdown was how to use virtual environments, how to engage with people. So I realized that the sessions I need to do, I need to build more interactivity with the audience, right? So like this, even in your hospitality industry, you need to list out what are the key challenges for the future, how is travel and tourism going to change in the future, right? And there are enough articles out there which are discussing those. First, you need to build that awareness. Second, look at your own organization and see, okay, am I working in a resort? Am I working in a tours and travels? How are things going to change? What value add can I bring in this changed environment? And then build the skills to drive that change. Hope I answered that question.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, Radhakrishna Pillai, for the question. The next question is from Adarsh Chandran. I have experienced situations where my team lead or managers are not used to managing virtual working environment. Don't you think it's important to give the managers training on how to manage team in a virtual environment?
Yes, as I told you, right? Maybe you need to talk to your senior leadership and give this feedback, right? So, one of the critical things in driving change in a crisis is constant feedback, right? So maybe again, this is where your thought leadership emerges, right? You should write maybe to who is the senior person within your organization, and don't even point out to a particular individual. You can give it as a feedback or a suggestion. And if you know some tips and techniques, right, where you feel if my leader or my manager needs to do, right? So this is what I explained earlier as the early adopter, right? You can be that change agent, saying that, look, this is what the first thing we as an organization, and again, your senior leadership may take that suggestion, and when they start, and you can even encourage your rest of your teams to give the same feedback to them, saying, look, this is what our leaders need to learn, and uh, can you help us build this skill within our managers? And maybe they will roll out a program for all managers how to manage virtual teams, right? Which many of the organizations I know today are doing.
Thank you, sir. We have next question from Jay Kumar. Thanks for the content. It is so good. But quick question is how to handle complex and unknown and very unknown view. What we should do as a leader and how to handle the team member.
So every unknown can be analyzed. So sometimes the challenge we have is we think it's unknown and we stop there, right? That is where your curiosity comes into the play, right? And then you should tap onto your network, right? For example, I speak to my friends and colleagues in US. I speak to my friends and colleagues in Singapore. And sometimes things which I think are unknown may be already known there, right? Because their environment is different. And my network will really help us uncover those unknowns and make them known. And once you have known, break it down, right? So don't come with the perfect final solution. You attack in the concept of divide and conquer approach, right? So I don't think, for example, if you ask me what is going to be my company's revenue in the next 3 quarters, right? It's an unknown, right? Because I don't know which customers are going to buy. But if I look at the industries which are going down, if I look at the industries which are going up, what is my company's market share in those companies which are going up versus what is my company's market share which is going down? Now that will help me build within my mind a kind of model, right, which says, okay, my company's revenue is going to drop down by 20%. Now, what are the new opportunities where the same products can be deployed to recover that loss, right? So that's why I said, if you think it's unknown and I can't do anything about it, we will stay there. But at the same time, if you start thinking, applying your thought leadership in those situations, right, that's when you see unknowns becoming known and you can easily handle that. Hope I answered that question.
Thank you, sir. Next is from Krishna Kumar. Great session, Dileepan. One question. Due to COVID-19, people are frustrated as many are new to work from home situation. Is there any tips to reduce the stress?
Okay. So one of the things I would recommend to, if you are people leader, is reduce the workload, right? And when I say reduce the workload, it's not about stopping doing things. As a leader, you need to prioritize, because I've seen people leaders within my own organization, right, saying, okay, it's COVID-19, everybody's sitting at home, let's keep them busy, right? So it's not a question of keeping them busy. It's a question of giving them the right work and helping them understand why this is number one, right? The second is ensuring that people get this kind of what's work versus what life. So educate team members about things they may be overworking, right? Because everybody thinks today my job is at stake. If I don't show results, I'm going to be dinged, right? So remove those kind of fear factors. As a enabling leader, right, you need to be constant touch with them. I speak to every team member that I have spread across the globe at least once a week. I'm not saying every day, but at least once a week. And I try to understand what's happening in their country, their region. I try to look at their workload for that week and then maybe make some adjustments, right? So if some high priority project comes or high priority escalation comes, I look at everyone in the team and say, okay, this particular activity person A is doing, maybe I can lower the priority, flag the person, flag the requester saying, okay, this cannot be handled this week, maybe we'll move to next week, but then assign that escalation to that person, right? Who is the right person to handle? So I think understanding your team, understanding the workload, because many of us are very used to letting people decide what they have to do, right? But we need to take more hands-on. So I explained about that, putting things in control, right? Taking charge of the situation. And sometimes it's okay. And again, you need to explain to people in the right perspective. So I usually tell my team, I'm not a command and control person, but today's situation demands that I need to assign work to each of you, not because I suspect whether you can do the work or not, but because I want you to really be sure that you are focusing on the right things, right? So again, I can do a separate session on work from home and how to make it this thing, but again, it's going to be at least 1 hour lecture on how to make work from home effective.
Sure,
Not a
sir.
short answer.
Sure. Next from Rupesh Pati. What about the infrastructure projects where work from home may not be possible? Do you feel Industry 4.0 technologies will be effective now in disruption management?
Definitely, right? So, industrial automation is going to make a big change to our world and it's going to accelerate that, right? So, for example, if you have a manufacturing line or a construction line where your JCB can be remotely managed, right, by a worker sitting at home, right? Again, using advanced vision technologies, advanced mechatronics, right? So that everything that a JCB does can be controlled remotely, right? Or on the other hand, if you are in a manufacturing, your entire manufacturing line, see, that's the advantage of some of the countries like China, which is going to have that industrial automation, which is way ahead to survive this, right? They may not be having people come into the factory at the same time goods are being produced and shipped unattended, right? So though that will have a big impetus in this change scenario. That's my view.
Sure, sir. Next question from Deepu Krishnan. With your experience, what are the industries that you foresee coming up and getting business advantage in the current scenario?
Okay. So about 2 days ago, I was seeing a interesting WhatsApp video, right, where somebody was predicting about 20 industries which are going to really make a this thing, right? So I would say any industry which can do things virtually, right? For example, virtual training, right? And technologies which support working from home, that's going to be a big plus in the future. The second area that I see as a this thing is remote entertainment, right? So how can you produce entertainment collaboratively being remote without having actors? So I saw this interesting video, right, where Mammootty and Mohanlal are appearing in the same video without them moving out of their house, right? So those kind of things will definitely make a big change. Then anything that will help, as I mentioned earlier, that industrial 4.0, the automation, right? The automation piece is going to be a big this thing, and there will be a lot of projects coming where our clients want to minimize the human intervention, and be it a process or be it a technology, make that very human independent, right? So this is something I've been warning many of my colleagues in the past, even before the COVID situation. I was telling people with the developments in AI, robotics, and automation, lot of jobs are going to go away. And now this particular situation is only going to accelerate that, because we know that humans can no more be dependent. We need to depend on technology to make things successful. Again, if you want, I can forward you that video, but again, it's not a research video. I wouldn't quote anything from that video, because it's somebody's viewpoint, and a lot of things happens on the macroeconomic situation also.
Sure, sir. We have next question from Sindhu Radhakrishnan. How can we manage change effectively when the organization has previously managed change projects badly? In that case, there will be resistance to change from the team.
Okay. So what I would suggest in such a situation is acknowledge that change has not been managed well in the past, right? So I would start with acknowledging the bad behavior or a bad situation first. And then obviously, if something was not managed effectively, there would have been enough learnings, right? So if there have been no learnings, you may need to do a kind of a retrospective to really understand why the change did not happen well last time. And then you put up a new plan which says, we acknowledge things didn't work past. These are the things we learned from that. These are the new inputs we are going to do a new plan, right? So that's the way I would handle that kind of a situation.
Sindhu has acknowledged it as a very good tip. Next question from Deepu Krishnan. What are the skills you would advise people to acquire to be better equipped in the current situation?
As I mentioned earlier, right, the first critical skill you need to have is virtual leadership, right? How do you, especially for this audience, I would say, how do you become a successful leader in a virtual environment? Be it within your own individual team, be it within your larger organization, right? So you all have to understand that things are going to be virtual. So that's my first suggestion for you. The second is emotional intelligence, right? Because if you are a high EQ individual, you are able to handle such situations much better. The third skill I would say, as I mentioned earlier, is automation, right? Or remote management, or doing things without human intervention. Any skills that you need, again, there are a whole host of skills I can suggest under each of these categories, but if I were to give you three tips, right, where to really focus, right, and what will really help you become that successful leader, I would say these are the three.
Sure, sir. From Sunil KR, how do leaders forecast during this uncertain times to the management?
Okay, that's a very interesting thing, right? So, whenever you do forecasting, you have to base it on two things, right? One is the past history or the run rate, and the second would be the future outlook, right? And I'm sure the challenge you have is you are not able to understand the future outlook. But you can always go back and dig out data, right? For example, if your organization has been existing even during 2008 when a similar situation developed, right? You can look at, okay, how things did in that situation and then do an extrapolation, right? And again, there are a lot of new tools and technologies available which helps you factor in disruptions, right, into your forecasting models. Again, I'm not an expert in that area, but I'm sure if you do some internet research, right, you will know that there are enough tools and technologies available to do forecasting in a disrupted world, and that would be what I would recommend to you. And it's
Thank
all
you.
data, and data is plenty today.
Thank you, sir. From Nandagopal, how do we manage work-life balance for yourself and your team during work from home? Since the line between work and home seems to be blurred a bit.
Okay. So the first thing I would say is discipline, right? So at least that's what I am practicing, right? Don't lose your routine, right? For example, okay, now that I am working from home, it doesn't matter when I get up, right? Second, ensure that, for example, what I do is I wake up in the morning, I do my morning routine, and I tell my wife that I have to start my work at X time, right? Again, that's individual dependent, whether it's 8 a.m., 9 a.m., 10 a.m., you decide. Then follow a schedule, right? Now, if you have a change schedule because of work from home, right? For example, there are late evening calls which earlier you never had to, right? But in the current situation, you need to make a small adjustment. And at least the policy I follow is before work from home, I used to work 9 hours a day. Even when I work from home, I don't work for more than 9 hours. The third tip I would give is take breaks, right? Because in an office, there are virtual breaks with a colleague dropping by and saying hello, or you getting up and going to cafeteria to catch a cup of tea. You need to ensure that you build in those things, but then don't extend those breaks, right? So again, in an office, you will be worried whether somebody will be watching me spending 1 hour in cafeteria, right? Have the same discipline, saying, okay, if I take a coffee break, it's 10 minutes where I'm not thinking of work. Maybe I'm going and reading a newspaper and coming back in 10 minutes and restarting. And again, these are some early tips I can suggest to you on uh, how to make work from home very effective.
Thank you, sir. Next question from Abraham Daniel. It is easy to select the top 33%, but as a middle manager, how can I convey the elimination of remaining the 67% who were with me for years?
Uh, I am assuming this question is with respect to workforce restructuring, right? And I wouldn't say it should be the tenure or uh, the skills that a person has today which needs to be looked at. You need to really look at what. So whenever I have faced similar challenges, right, what I look at is what is future holding for me, right? And what are the skills and capabilities I need for that future, right? Now, within my 100%, who is the 33%? One, not only skills, but sometimes even their attitude matters, right? Somebody may be very skilled, but if he is not able to survive in a changed environment, there is no point in carrying it. So I would not say, when I say top 30%, right? You should be really focusing on what are the skills and capabilities that you need for the future, irrespective of how long they have been with your team or what they have done in the past, or right, you need to pick that set of people who will really help you drive that future. That's how I would go about doing that. And another thing you can do as a leader is help that remaining 67% to find new opportunities, right? Because whenever I've helped somebody in my organization to find a new path, either within or outside the organization, that builds a long-term relationship. And these are the people who will come back to you even tomorrow when you are reopening, right? They will come and say, okay, XYZ help me to transition. And as a lesson for the future, I would say is keep your team always current and upgraded, right? So don't let your team. So even if at a bigger level they choose 33%, you should ensure that your 67% become part of that 33%, right? Because of their skills and the constant skill upgradation you have been focusing within your team.
Thank you, sir. We have other questions related to the work from home scenarios, but as you said, it would be good to have a separate session on that. So,
Yes.
as we are short of time, I think let's close it for today. So, Jai Kishore, would you mind
So I
to?
want to just make one final comment, right? So you all know that the change today we are seeing has come from a remote country, right? Which had a lot of wisdomly scholars, right? And they have solved this problem or puzzle long, long ago, right? So Confucius said we must change often to be in constant happiness and wisdom. And I hope that this session and the learnings that you have been having in the last few weeks and months are really able to help you survive and move ahead. Wish you all the best. Thank
Thank
you.
you, Dileepan, for the wonderful session. And Jay, are you back?
Yeah, I'm back. I'm back.
Yeah, thank
Yeah. Thank you, Dileepan, for the wonderful session. And it makes it very interesting because the webinar is happening in the right time. And when we are talking about change, the world is staring at a change which we never expected. And the concepts and ideas you've told, it will, I hope it will help us going back to our work when the situation is in control. And let's be early adapters and adapt to the new normals at the earliest. And thank you all for participating, attending the session. I think there are some people who joined from HP, and thank you for that. And thank you for those who asked the questions. That was interesting, and that was educational for other participants also. Thank you very much. And
Thanks, everyone. Bye.
yeah. And this is our PDU claim code. I hope everyone is able to see this. You can claim your PDUs in this code. And our next session is an inter-society collaborative event webinar on 6th evening. This is on design thinking by Francis E.J., a former director of VSSC. And all of your sent emails, please register. Thank you once again. See you in the next webinar. Thank you.